Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Weekend Reading, where I discuss what my reading habits of comic books from last week, this coming current week, and just my love of them in general. I discuss them a little bit. I could have said that better. It's just my comic book related little thing that I do on YouTube. If you watch, you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's talk about what we read last week. Last week, we had Birthright, Volume 10, Epilogue, and The Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 13, King's Ransom. Birthright, Volume 10, Epilogue, was the final chapter of that storyline, which I didn't realize it started in 2014. Been going on longer than I thought. But it was a good story all around with great art by Andre Brezin, and a good story by Joshua Williamson. But the art was really the selling point of this comic book, and it was a good one. But it wasn't my favorite read of the week because it was just a kind of a whatever closing to the story. My favorite of the week was, well, since it's the only other choice, it must be The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 13. This was a good story. It also was the conclusion of a sort of overall reaching story that was going on throughout that book. Of course, Spider-Man is an ongoing series and not a limited series like Birthright was. But this was kind of the conclusion of the sort of Boomerang Tablet of Life storyline. To sum it up, Boomerang was contracted by the Kingpin to steal something called the Tablet of Life. It's an ancient Lemurian tablet that had been broken up into multiple pieces, but when put back together would give the person who has it incredible power, like the power to bring someone back from the dead, which is what the Kingpin wanted it for. Everybody thought he wanted it to bring his wife back from the dead because he seemed to miss his dead wife. Somewhere along the way, it looked like Boomerang had betrayed him and stolen a piece of the tablet. And Boomerang had through some weird situation, he had gained the ability to be the only one who could track the missing pieces, and he was the only one who knew how to get them all. And he'd been working with he had inadvertently become Peter Parker's roommate, and he was also working with Spider-Man as in almost a heroic role to get them back. So they were dealing with that. On top of that, Spider-Man is also dealing with the fact that he's working with J. Jonah Jameson, his new online newspaper thing, which I think it's called Threats and Menaces. Jameson actually gave Spider-Man a job. He's aware of Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person. He gave Spider-Man a job. Basically, they gave him a fancy new suit that he can wear, and that will basically monitor. It will basically not live broadcast his superheroics, but it'll record them so they can then stream it. So basically, he'll be the first superhero who's streaming his activities. It's not live stream, so they can cut things out as necessary because there might be things they don't want to share. But it basically he'll be paid by Threats and Menaces to stream his superheroic activities, which he agreed to. The Kingpin definitely wanted Boomerang back, so he contacted all the crime lords in New York and basically told them all that anyone who brings him Boomerang and the Tablet of Life pieces that he's missing will basically get a get out of jail free card because he's the mayor of New York and can do shit like that. This leads to conflicts between all the criminals in New York and Spider-Man and Boomerang. Meanwhile, while that's going on, as if there isn't enough storyline already, Robbie Robertson, is that his name? Or maybe it's Randy Robertson. Joe Robertson's son Joe Robertson, who's the publisher of the current publisher of the Daily Bugle, his son is dating Janice Lincoln, who's the new version of the Beetle. She's also the daughter of L. Lonnie Lincoln, who is also known as the crime lord Tombstone. And if you know anything about comic book history, Tombstone and Joe Robertson have a very bad history. They grew up together and they despise each other. So when they each find out that their respective kid is dating the other's kid, they both don't handle it well, and then this leads to conflict with I think his name is the Crime Master and Madame Mask kidnapping Joe Robertson's son and Janice Lincoln, and then their fathers having to go save, and then Spider-Man teaming up with their dads to have to go save them, and then we get back to the main storyline where after Boomerang runs off alone and Spider-Man finally figures out where he is, and he recruits a bunch of superheroes he knows, like Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones and Spider-Woman and Wolverine and Hawkeye, I think it is, to help him find Boomerang and get the life tablets before Kingpin gets his hands on them. This leads to a confrontation with a few of Boomerang's old accomplices, Speed Demon, Hydro Man, and the Shocker. And they manage to beat them. And then there's one, when they finally get all the tablets collected, all the pieces of the tablet collected, there's one final piece they need, but to get their hands on it, they have to prove that they're heroic. And Spider-Man stops Boomerang from trying to do it, because even though Boomerang seems to be taking a more noble turn, he knows he's not quite a hero yet, so Spider-Man does it. And he ultimately has to give up his whole streaming his activities thing, because if he keeps doing heroic acts for selfish reasons, he can't really consider himself a hero. And he gets the last tablet and then gets jumped by the three supervillains he and Boomerang just beat, and then realizes too late that Boomerang double-crossed him. The whole reason that Boomerang double-crossed him is that because Boomerang knew what the last test was going to be, and he knew that he would never pass it, so he needed an actual, genuine hero to do it. So he figured, who better hero than the hero who's always beating the crap out of him, Spider-Man. And he knew that Peter Parker and Spider-Man were connected, and when he found out that Peter needed a roommate, he figured that would be his best way in. And it all worked out in the end. And he gives the tablets to the Kingpin because he was still working for the Kingpin the whole time. And the Kingpin realizes that his wife didn't want to be with him anymore, so he doesn't want to dishonor her by bringing her back, and instead brings back their dead son, who was the criminal known as the Rose. So now they just have a new criminal in town, or an old criminal returned in town. So not exactly what you would call a win for Spider-Man, but seeing as it's Peter Parker, that's usually how his story goes. So that was last week. What do we got coming up this week? Still at 2. We have Reign of X Volume 3. It feels like we just read Volume 2, but now here we are with Volume 3. We're getting through these pretty good. Let's see what we got. Difficult reunions in the Reign of X. The Marauders are rocked by the rematch of the Century, Storm versus Callisto. Yeah. As Carmen and Danny delve deeper into their nightmares, the New Mutants must prepare for the fight of their lives. I can't read worth shit. Still reeling from X of Swords, Cable turns back to the matter of missing mutant babies, a subject he knows a thing or two about. Yep. And Wolverine returns to Madripoor for an underworld criminal auction, because the next item up for sale is his old pal Maverick. Wow, that's big. This is collecting Marauders 17 by Gary Dugan, Vita Ayala, and Benjamin Piercy. New Mutants 15 by Matteo Lolli, Rod Reese, and Phil Noto. Cable 7 by Adam Kubert, Victor Bogdanovich, I'm not sure. It's just a VIC. I think that's Bogdanovic. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. And Wolverine 8 through 9 by Edgar Delgado, Antonio Fabella, Matthew Wilson, and Frank Martin. So that should be an interesting read. Up next, we have a completely new thing from Image called Radiant Black Volume 1, Not So Secret Origin. My apologies. Let's see what this one's about. My apologies. Nathan Burnett has just turned 30, and things aren't great. He's working and failing at 2 jobs, his credit card debt is piling up, and his only move is moving back home with his parents. But when Nathan discovers and unlocks the ethereal cosmic radiant, he's given the power to radically change his fortunes. There's just one problem. The powers don't belong to him, and the cosmic beings who created them want them back by any means necessary. For fans of Invincible and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comes a brand new series from acclaimed writer Kyle Higgins and artist Marcelo Costa that reinvents superheroes for a new generation. Sounds very Peter Parker-ish, oddly enough, but it looks interesting. The art definitely looks good. So we'll see. This might be the favorite of the week. Who knows once we read it. Now, here's the thing. I want to try something new this week. Normally, this is the part where I would go to the question of the week. Had to pause for the little thing. But as I was thinking about the question of the week this week, I go through the list of questions because I have a few written down. I've had all of them written down that I've written. Some are better than others, admittedly. But I remember there was one on the list that, I think it was, what was the best abandoned plot point? What was the best plot that was just completely abandoned? And I started thinking about that, and then it got me thinking about something. And this something that it got me thinking about was Mpox. And then this got me thinking about doing a whole new thing. I'll still do the question of the week when I feel the question is suited, but I want to kind of diversify a little bit to go from week to week. So this week I'm starting a new thing called Abandoned Plots. I'm not sure that's the best title. If I can think of a better title, I'll do it, but right now that's the best I could come up with. Abandoned Plots. As I was talking about Mpox. What the hell is Mpox? Well, you might be asking, if you don't know. Mpox was a bit of a plot point that was introduced in the X-Men, well, in the Marvel Comics in general, a couple of years back. Let's see. When was it originally introduced? Yeah, it was introduced about in 2015, so about 6 years ago. It did not last in the comic books very long. It was basically a plot point of during an event called Infinity, Black Bolt fought Thanos. And it didn't go well for Black Bolt, and he ended up destroying his city-state of Attilan, and also releasing all of the Terrigen mist that was trapped inside the city. He destroyed all the Terrigen crystals and released all the Terrigen mist that gives Inhumans their abilities, and he released it into 2 giant clouds that spread across the Earth. This started just giving anybody with an Inhuman gene, it started activating their Inhuman abilities, which created a bunch of new Inhumans. But it also had a side effect, because any mutants who were exposed to it who were exposed to this cloud, it killed them. It made them sick, and if they're exposed to too much, it would kill them right away. It killed or made sick several notable X-Men. It killed one of the first mutants it killed was Jamie Madrox. It killed Cyclops. It sickened characters like Rogue. Here's the thing: they all got better. A lot of the Mpox thing was just abandoned. You could say it was abandoned by the recent changes in the X-Men, but honest to God, it was abandoned before that. It was almost completely forgotten about before that. It was dropped so hard, almost like it didn't happen. Characters just they that were sick all of a sudden just weren't sick anymore, and you just didn't. Nobody questioned why. I don't even think they ever actually explained why, which is why it's considered an abandoned plot. And as for characters like Cyclops and Jamie Madrox, they just got better. And by that I mean they came back from the dead. Cyclops, it was some weird thing where he was something to do with the Phoenix and he was resurrected. And Jamie Madrox, it was some kind of... I believe it was... it was just one of his dupes, which, by the way, is it's bringing me back to another thing, because the whole Mpox thing was supposed to be basically a rehashing of different version of similar thing that took place throughout the 90s. From 1993 to 2001, which was way longer what the Mpox story lasted, there was something called the Legacy Virus that was just a part of the X-Men comic books. Numerous characters died of the Legacy Virus, including Jamie Madrox, who got better then too. Another character that died of it was Illyana Rasputin, which horribly damaged her brother, Piotr Rasputin, also known as Colossus. Illyana, who died of the Legacy Virus, also got better, came back from the dead. She's the mutant known as Magic. Colossus actually sacrificed his life to cure the Legacy Virus, because the Legacy Virus was just released as a virus, but the cure for it had to actually be injected into a person who would then die from this counter virus, but then they would release it into the air and it would negate the Legacy Virus. So he sacrificed his life to cure the Legacy Virus. He also eventually got better. It's comic books. People don't stay dead long. Look at the way the X-Men that's the one thing I like about the X-Men books now. They just completely go, death doesn't matter in comic books, so let's actually make a reason why we don't have to worry about it anymore. And get creative with that. But that was a major plot point in the X-Men. You see, the X-Men started out, when they were originally created, they were supposed to basically be an allegory for society's outcasts. You know, the people who fear and hate them. But here's the thing. Back in the 60s, that was supposed to be a metaphor for minorities, mostly black people, because that was around the Civil Rights Movement era. By the 90s, that was now translating to gay people. And the Legacy Virus was, you guessed it, a metaphor for AIDS. The Legacy Virus was actually created by a mutant called Strife, who was Cable's evil clone, who tricked Mr. Sinister into releasing it into the world after he had been killed. Hence being his legacy to the world. Strife also eventually got better. Like I said, it's comic books. No one stays dead for long. It's more a matter of when than if when people come back. And Mpox was supposed to be a repeat of that, but it just didn't work the same anymore. Not to mention, anyone who is old enough to remember just realized they're just doing the Legacy Virus shit again. And that basically petered out eventually, but at least they came up with a good conclusion of it. The Mpox storyline was just completely abandoned. I mean, it led to... It was basically explored in a miniseries called The Death of X, which is where Cyclops died, and then it even led to a story called Inhumans vs. X-Men, where as the name suggests, the Inhumans and the X-Men fought. And that led to the destruction of the Terrigen Cloud, but it didn't really stop the mutants from being sick, but then they just eventually got better with no explanation, like I said. And this was a time when they were really pushing... It was also a thing where they were really pushing the Inhumans at the time, which is something I'm going to get to. That's going to be another abandoned plots thing that I'm going to talk about later, so I won't get into that too much. But I'm going to be rehashing a little bit of what I just talked about here, but we'll get to that. What was my point of talking about this? It was just kind of an annoying thing that I thought of. It was just something that came and went with no explanation and no real purpose. Because anyone who died was so quickly brought back, and anyone who was sick just got better without any explanation as to why. So, yeah, that would be my first abandoned plot storyline that I just felt was just kind of bullshit. Just a bullshit story that was abandoned in a bullshit way. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I don't know if it was worth talking about. It felt like it was worth talking about to me. It was just something that popped up in my head and I want to rant about. Sometimes I like to rant, so I think that's what my abandoned plots will be. It'll be plot points that I was just like, whatever the fuck happened with that, and I'll just rant about it a little bit and see what people think. Most people don't tend to watch this anyways. There's only one person that really does, and they don't even know that much about comic books. Hey, what's up? But I do. It's really the only thing I know that much about. Anyways, that's enough of that. So yeah, that's weekend reading for this week. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I hope you enjoy your reading whenever you happen to do it. Take it easy, folks.